This is part two of the lecture for chapter 15. Um, we are going to start with the discussion of real versus nominal GDP. We discussed a bit of this in part one. Real versus nominal GDP. So, what we're trying to do, or one thing we want to do with GDP is figure out, well, is our economy increasing through time? Specifically, are we growing through time? Is our economy growing? And if we have an increase in prices, that can kind of blur us trying to figure out if our economy is growing or shrinking. Okay. The GDP can grow just because prices increased, but the actual economy did not. Okay. So rather than just looking at nominal GDP or the value of output using its current prices, for example, 2020 output using 2020 prices or 2025 output using 2025 prices, which is not corrected for inflation or price increases or changes, it could decrease. Prices can decrease. We as economists, we use real GDP. It's the value of output using the price of a particular base year. Okay. Real GDP is corrected for price changes. Specifically, the more important one is inflation or price increases. For the base year, the price we use of the base year, for that base year, the nominal GDP equals real GDP. Okay? So let's go through this. Let's go through an example. Okay. So let's look at the following. Okay. Let's suppose our economy um, uh, 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 manufactures two different products, pizza and latte. Okay. So what I'm going to do for this is I am going to share Excel and calculate this in Excel. I think it's going to be a lot better than me trying to kind of calculate this in the whiteboard. Okay. Uh, Share. So I'm sharing the Excel screen. Okay. So let's look at 3 years. Okay. Let's get the 3 years, 2014, 2015, 2016. Okay. And let's suppose our economy consists of just manufacturing pizza and manufacturing coffee or latte. Okay. Do this, kind of organize everything. And for pizza, okay, we manufacture 400 in 2014, 500 in 2015, and 600 in 2015. It's 600 in 2016. For latte, it's 1,000, 1,100, and 1,200. 1,200. Okay. And GDP is measured in the value of these things that we produce. Okay, it's in dollars. So we need to see how much do a single pizza cost? $10. $11 and $12. Okay, $10 in 2014, $11, 2015, and $16 in 2000, $12 in 2016. And for lattes, it is $2.50, and $3. Okay. And so let's make this that. So we have pennies, cents. Okay. So now what we're going to do is calculate nominal GDP. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is value of pizza and value of latte. Okay. So we're going to first calculate individually the value of pizza and the value of lattes that are created in each year. In order for me to do that, I'm going to multiply 400 pizzas times how much each pizza costs, $10. Okay, it's 4,000. Okay. The value of pizza in 2015 is 500 times 11, and the value of pizza in 2016 is 600 times 12. We could do the same thing for latte. 1,000 lattes are made. They're $2 each. So the value is $2,000 for lattes. Okay. In 2015 is 2,750. In 2016 is 3,600. Now I'm going to do, let's say our economy only consists of these two products. So GDP is the sum of these two values. Okay. So our GDP in 2014 is $6,000. You know what? We should do this better like that. In 2015 is $8,250, and 2016 is $10,800. Now again, because we're using the prices in that specific year, okay? So we're using the price pizza price in 2014 to measure the value of pizza produced in 2014, the pizza price in 2015 to measure the value in 2015, etc., etc. This is actually nominal GDP right here. Okay. Oops, daisy. And it looks like nominal GDP went from 6,000, 8,250, and 10,800. Okay. But you have to remember part of this increase was due to the prices increasing. Part of it is we could see pizza production does increase and latte production does increase, but also the prices increase. So the magnitude of the increase in nominal GDP is amplified by the fact that the prices increase. So the magnitude of the magnitude of the growth of the economy is magnified by the price increase. So what we're going to do is standardize this and calculate real GDP. And in order for us to do that, okay, I'm going to calculate a base year. So let's say the base year is 2014. And so we're going to use 2014 prices to calculate real GDP. So I'm going to copy this table, create it down here. And I'm going to change all these to $10, $10, $2, $2. Okay. And you could see that the increase in, now this is real GDP, is from 6,000 to 7,200. Here, 6 to 8,250. And from 8,250 to 10,800, it's only 7,200 to 8,400. So let's calculate the percent change. And what I'm going to do is calculate it very simply. The annual percent change. This is 8,000 minus 6,000 divided by the previous year of 6,000. Okay. And I'll do that real quickly down here. And you could see that if we just looked at nominal GDP, the percent change of nominal GDP is above 30% for each year, 37.5% from 14 to 15, and 30.91% from 15 to 16. But if we just control for the fact that, geez, some of that increase in GDP was due to price increases, and we just kind of shut that down, then you could see the true increase of just the quantity or the output is 20% and 16.67%. Okay. All right, let's go back to the whiteboard. Where's the whiteboard? There it is. Okay, let's go back to the whiteboard. All right, so I just calculated nominal and real GDP. And let's move on. All right. So now I'm going to introduce you to a concept called GDP deflator. Clear this. Oh, okay. Well, I think come out good. Okay, so let's just do it this way. GDP deflator. There's a formula. So destroy the formatting. If GDP, what is GDP deflator? It's the measure of the price level with me because this formula screwed up the formatting. Okay, let's just stop there. All right. GDP deflator. It's the measure of the level of the price level calculated as the ratio of nominal GDP to real GDP. Remember, for the base year, nominal GDP to real GDP is just 1. Okay, because uh, they're equal value. So if you just divide by the 2, it's equal to 1 times 100. So the GDP deflator for the base year is 100. Okay, this is a measure of the overall price level of prices. So if the nominal GDP goes up compared to the real GDP, so let's say it's 110, okay, right here. I mean, it's 110. So then, I'm sorry. Um, if nominal GDP is higher than real GDP, then this is a positive number. then we are saying that the prices are going up. If the nominal GDP is below real GDP, this right here is less than 1, okay? Then the GDP, then we're saying that the prices are falling. So let me say this one more time, okay? If the nominal GDP is higher than real GDP, this is greater than 1, okay? This is greater than 1, okay? That means the prices are going up. If nominal GDP is less than real GDP, this ratio is less than 1. It's a fraction that's, less than 1. That means prices are falling down. Okay, move on. Sorry about that. Okay. So GDP deflator measures the current level of prices relative to the level of the prices in the base year and can be used to take inflation out of nominal GDP. Okay, deflates nominal GDP. This is the GDP deflator because this thingy, the GDP deflator, can be used to take the inflation out of nominal GDP. Okay, so again, what is inflation, anyways? All right, so let me clear this. Then I don't think I really introduced that or didn't clearly gave you a definition. Okay. Inflation is when the general prices, overall prices of the economy is rising. Okay? Is when the price of the stuff that we're buying basically goes up. That is inflation. Okay? Deflation is when the prices of the stuff we're buying goes down. Okay? So what is inflation rate? Inflation rate is the percent change in some measure of the price level from one period to another. It's basically saying it's trying to figure out, okay, so it's a change in the prices and specifically is the percent change in the prices. Okay. So one measure of inflation rate uses the GDP deflator. Okay. So we could measure inflation. We could measure the inflation rate. One way is using the GDP deflator. So inflation rate is equal to GDP deflator, okay, in year 2 minus GDP deflator in year 1 divided by GDP deflator in year 1 times 100. We got to multiply this by 100 times 100. Okay. So let's do this with our Excel file, okay, that we used and to calculate real GDP and nominal GDP. We'll calculate the GDP deflator, as well as the inflation rate using the GDP deflator. So here is our Excel file that we calculated. And let's calculate the GDP deflator here. And remember what the formula for GDP deflator was. Okay? It was the nominal GDP divided by the real GDP times 100. Let's calculate that. So this is equal to, this is the nominal GDP divided by real GDP is right there times 100. So it should just be 100. Okay. The next one is nominal for 2015. Okay. Divided by the nominal of 2015. I mean, real 2015, nominal 2015 divided by real 2015 times 100. And the last one is nominal 2016 divided by real 2016 times 100. Okay. And I'll just make it 2 decimals so it's clean. Okay. So these are the GDP deflators for each of the years. 2014 is 100. And you can see it's going up 114, 128. So we could see the prices are going up. Okay. This is kind of a rough measure of overall prices, and it's going up. Well, how much is it going up by? So let's calculate the inflation rate. Okay. And the inflation rate that we calculate is basically the new GDP deflator minus the old divided by the old. Okay. So let's calculate that real quickly here. The percentage sign there. And you could see that price increased by 14.58% from 14 to 15. Okay. And the price, that's the inflation rate. And the price increased from 2015 to 16 by 12.21%. Okay. All right, let's go back. Stop sharing, go back to the whiteboard. Okay, clear this. It's the GDP deflator. And then now let's talk about GDP and the economic well-being of the people in the country. GDP and economic well-being. Okay. Real GDP per capita. So one thing we can do is divide real GDP by the number of people in the country to calculate roughly the GDP per person, or it's basically a rough measure of the average person's standard of living. Okay. We assume this is kind of, we could assume that this is kind of like the income of the average person in that country. Okay. A rough measure. So GDP is not a perfect measure of well-being. Okay. Robert Kennedy issued a very eloquent yet harsh criticism of GDP. Not this isn't the this is the guy, the father of the guy who's, anyways, not getting to that. Okay. A larger GDP means good life and better healthcare, better educational system. Okay. So if your GDP per person is high, generally indicates that the life of the people in that country is better, and we have better healthcare and we have better education. Okay. It measures our ability to obtain many of the inputs into a worthwhile life. You know, we're smarter, we're healthier, We generally have a better life. But however, GDP does not value the quality of the environment, how much leisure time you have. Sometimes, if you to get to a lot of output, the workers work really long hours and they don't have time for leisure. Okay. Doesn't measure certain things like non-market activities, such as childcare a parent provides at home. Okay. And it doesn't, and GDP per person does not measure how equitable the income is distributed. Okay. We just have a measure of the country's output divided by the number of person. It doesn't necessarily mean that the average person really does take home that much money. Okay. It's a rough measure. And it is quite possible if you have a lot of people, a very few people that has most of the income of that country, and a lot of people that have very little, but on average, it looks like it's a pretty good situation. Okay, so it doesn't measure the fairness or the equitable, even distribution of the income. Okay. All right, let's keep going. You know what? This one, I will share my notes because there's a bunch of tables that I want you to see. All right. Many indicators of the quality of life are positively correlated with GDP. Now, that is to be fair to, the average GDP measure, GDP per capita. It is correlated with many quality of life indicators. For example, here's GDP and life expectancy in 12 countries. And you could see we are measuring real GDP per person on the x-axis and the average life expectancy of the people living in that country on the y-axis. And you could see here those with really high GDP per person, Japan, Germany, and US, has fairly high levels of life expectancy. And those with lower, let's say a couple down here, Nigeria has really low real GDP per person, and you're only expected to live up between 50 to 55 years in Nigeria. Pakistan, you live higher, okay, but it's lowered GDP per person, but it's still lower than these guys down here. Okay, you could see here this bubble mass. They're associated with lower real GDP per person, and the life expectancy in this area is lower than the life expectancy of these three countries. Okay, and here's GDP per person versus average schooling education in 12 countries. Again, you could see those with high levels of real GDP per person have high levels of average years in school. Okay, most of these, Japan has 12 years in school, so on average, Germany and US, some college. And you could see as real GDP falls, the level of schooling falls. Okay. GDP and overall life statistics, a scale of 0 to 10. So this is a subjective measure of how satisfied you are with life in these 12 countries. And you could see as GDP goes up per person, satisfaction does kind of go up. This one's a little blurry because Brazil is up here compared to Japan. You know, people in Japan are known to work really hard and long hours. But generally speaking, you could see that there is kind of a positive relationship this way. It's kind of flat, where at the lower end, the scores are getting a bit lower compared to the higher end. Okay. We are done with this chapter. This is a summary. I will allow you to read that on your own. Summary of the chapter. We are done with the lecture of this chapter. Have a good day.